Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to try that again. Good morning, everyone. That's great. Good. I know some people had long rides this morning and early starts, and we so appreciate all of you being here with us. My name is Mary Grant, and I'm the president of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate, and it is a great pleasure and honor to welcome all of you here this morning. We have an inspiring day ahead of us. Some of you were here when the Institute first did a convening like this in 2016, and we decided this year that we would re-engage, we would invite many of you, all of you to come back and look at how we do this convening on an annual basis and get some input as to where is the best place, where do we support women in leadership, whether it's elected life, business life, civic life, at every level where women are making a difference. So thank you for being here. Today you will hear from women from across New England who will share their unique perspective of the state and importance of women's leadership in public office and civic life on the local, state, and national level. We hope that these conversations will leave you feeling inspired, but beyond that, we will hope it will inspire all of us to think about what we can do, what all of us can do to make a difference in our democracy. As we begin, I would like to take a moment and thank a few people who have helped make today happen. We have partners who have joined us in organizing and reaching out, so I'm just going to give a shout out to the partners who have helped with this, and any member of a partner organization or anyone who is connected with them, if you want to just stand after I do the list so we can just recognize all of you. The American Association of University Women Work Smart in Boston, Asian American Women's Political Initiative, Big Sister Association of Greater Boston, the Center for Women in Business at Bentley University, the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at UMass Boston, the Chica Project, the City of Boston Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, Emerge Massachusetts, the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, the Latin Circle, the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus, Spark Boston, Strong Women, Strong Girls, and the Partnership, Inc. If everyone who has a role with those could just please stand so we can thank you. Thank you. We do our work so much better when we do it together, so thank you for that. I'd also like to just thank many people have worked very hard on today, but I want to just give a recognition and acknowledgement of the incredibly inspired hard work of Claire Cooper, who put this together. So Claire, thank you and congratulations. Along with Natalie Boyle and Kelly Bovio. I want to just thank my teammates here at the Institute, Gina Peril, for just doing this and making this happen. So another round of applause for those great women who inspire me every day. Thank you. This morning we will hear from United States Senator Maggie Hassan, and a little bit later from Congresswomen Catherine Clark and Rosa DeLauro. We will also hear from Ann Bookman from UMass Boston Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, and from Amanda Hunter from the Barbara Lee Family Foundation. Our afternoon will focus on local and state leaders right here in the Commonwealth. We will be joined by Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, who will kick us off, and then we'll be followed by a moderated discussion with recently elected Massachusetts mayors Yvonne Spicer and Ruth Ann Fuller. But before we start the day, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Institute and about what makes our organization so very special. The Institute was envisioned by the late Senator Edward Kennedy. It is dedicated to educating the public about the important role of the Senate in government, encouraging civic participation, and invigorating civil discourse. And I think we need that more than ever. If you look around, you can see the walls programmed beautifully. So we do it through digital exhibitions, through engaging students right here in this space and around the entire building. We work with visitors to create an experience that is hands-on, where they can apply theory to knowledge to practice. It's very, very exciting. And just a little over 3 years ago, we opened the doors to this incredible place that you're now sitting in, this beautiful replica of the United States Senate Chamber. And during that time, I was working at UNC Asheville as the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina, Asheville. And before that, at the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts as president, and then at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So my life, my work around what young people want, what young people need has always been an inspiration. I'm looking in this room, and I won't blow their cover yet, but I'm looking at a former graduate student of mine and a former undergraduate student of mine from MCLA, and I'm so proud of what they have done. I watched as the Institute has changed the narrative, really worked to change the narrative, and we need to do that more and more. So when I got the call to come and lead this great place, to leave North Carolina in December, to return to New England, the work here is important and compelling. And every day we learn from those who come through our doors. Every day we learn from them. When we are in this room and we watch high school and middle school students debating gun legislation, when young people are writing speeches and sharing them on the floor of the Senate about the things that are on their mind, we learn every day. When we serve the schools who are right around us, we learn every day. We talk about civil discourse and the importance for that more and more, and we are here today because of that. We are working to build a pipeline of the next generation of leaders, and we're doing that every day. I'm so honored to be here with all of you today, and the person who has helped make this happen in so many ways, the person who was on the other end of that phone call was Vicki Kennedy. And if any of you have met Vicki, you know when you get a phone call, you don't say no. Vicki is the co-founder and president of the board of our institute. In addition to playing an integral role bringing this institute to life, she's a leading voice in the empowerment of women and girls in our society. She serves as senior counsel at the international law firm Greenberg Traurig LLP, is a trustee of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and is on the board of directors of the National Leadership Roundtable. Additionally, she is a member of the Commission on Political Reform at the Bipartisan Policy Center. It has been such a wonderful experience getting to know Vicki and to work with her. I thank you for your leadership. And when I was reading an article that was printed last fall about this place, and someone referred to this as a monument, and Vicki quickly corrected it and said, this is not a monument. It's not about one person. It's about our democracy. Vicki Kennedy.
Thank you so much, Mary Grant, for your kind introduction and for all the great work you're doing here at the Kennedy Institute. As the president of this special place that bears my husband's name, you define what it is to be a woman in leadership. With your vision, your drive, your dogged determination, you're propelling this place to new heights of excellence. Thank you so much. There's so many extraordinary leaders in this room. I could spend my entire time today just calling you out, but don't worry, I won't. But I do hope you'll indulge me just a moment so that I can say a special word of welcome to the immediate past president of the Kennedy Institute, Dr. Jean McCormick. Jean, where are you? Thank you. Jean, it is so wonderful to have you here with us this morning, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that we would never have been able to open this place on time if it weren't for your leadership. So we welcome you back with open arms and a grateful heart. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here today with all of you. Such an amazing group of women. We have a fabulous program today, as Dr. Grant just said. We're going to be hearing from individuals who are among the best and brightest women leaders in the nation. No, scratch that. They're among the best and the brightest leaders in this nation, period. These leaders come from both houses of the United States Congress, from state and local governments, from academia, nonprofits, and the media. And all of them, in ways big and small, are setting an example and laying the groundwork for the generation of leaders that will follow. What a thrill it is to have them all here today. And I have the great honor this morning of introducing one of those extraordinary leaders, our keynote speaker. My husband, the late Senator Edward Kennedy, believed with all his heart that politics is a noble profession, and our next speaker personifies that nobility. She shows through the power of her own example that public service can make a positive difference in the lives of men and women in this country, and indeed men and women around the world. As governor of New Hampshire, she worked with both Republicans and Democrats to advance a positive agenda for her state. And by doing that, she was able to achieve what many people thought impossible. This leader is a Democrat, yet even when both houses of her legislature were controlled by Republicans, she was able to forge bipartisan consensus to benefit the people of her state. She worked with the legislature to balance the budget and at the same time hold down increases in college tuition and cut taxes for small business. She was able to expand health coverage to 50,000 of the most needy residents of her state and to increase funding to combat the scourge of opioid addiction. She made strides for the developmentally disabled, and when she ended her term as governor, New Hampshire had more people employed than at any time in its history, and it had the lowest unemployment rate in the country. Now that's leadership. Our speaker has brought that same nobility and determined advocacy to her service as a United States Senator. Although she's only been in Washington for a little over a year, she's already known and admired for the passion of her convictions as well as for her civility. With her calm demeanor, strong work ethic, and outreach to people on the other side of the aisle, she's earned the respect of both her colleagues and her constituents. One of her committees is Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, appropriately known as the HELP Committee. As many of you know, my husband served on that committee for nearly 47 years, and nearly 30 of those years he was either the chairman or the ranking member of that committee. So that committee has a very special place in my heart. It also has a special place in the heart of our speaker. She's using her seat on the HELP Committee to work on strengthening Social Security, advancing the rights of people with disabilities, promoting mental health parity. She's working on women's health, on education, on workforce development. She's also a member of the Homeland Security Committee and the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee and the Joint Economic Committee. Women do it all, don't they? How lucky we are to have her in the trenches, fighting to keep us secure. Not only is she fighting to keep us safe through a strong military, but she's also fighting to keep us safe in our neighborhoods. She's fighting against discrimination and for equal economic opportunity. She advocates for 21st century infrastructure and for a transportation system worthy of the people who rely on it. Innovation, environmental protection, combating the opioid epidemic are also key elements of her agenda. We are so fortunate to have this extraordinary woman, this extraordinary leader, here with us this morning. But she's no stranger to this town. She was born in Boston. And she's no stranger to Columbia Point. Her late father was, among his many other honors, the president of the University of the Massachusetts System in the 1970s. And he was responsible for the growth of UMass Boston and for attracting the JFK Library to this location. And her father and her mother were among the earliest supporters of a young would-be senator named Edward M. Kennedy. Our family will never forget it. It is my great pleasure to introduce her now, our keynote speaker, my friend, a great leader, the junior senator from New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan.
Wow. Thank you all very much. Good morning. Good morning. Vicki, thank you. Everybody have a seat. Vicki, thank you for that introduction, for all of your service to our country and your leadership at this institute, as well as in many other arenas. I am also reminded, as I look out at this beautiful replica of the United States Senate, and a small point of New Hampshire pride, the desks were built by a New Hampshire craftsman who is quite wonderful. But, you know, I am reminded that it is almost an exact replica of the United States Senate. It is different in that it is accessible to people who might use a wheelchair. It is different because it has digital screens and technology available on the walls. And I find myself thinking how beautifully that represents Ted Kennedy's legacy, because Ted understood the institution of the United States Senate. He loved it dearly. This wonderful institute is an extraordinary reflection of not only the physical being, but how the United States Senate should operate. But Senator Ted Kennedy also understood that our country is forward-looking, and that to honor our values, one has to be willing to change and adjust and make progress. So as I looked around this morning, I thought about that. I thought about how these improvements would actually be quite good in the United States Senate. And I also thought about my colleague, Tammy Duckworth, who just about 10 days ago was the first United States Senator ever to come onto the floor holding her newborn baby. You know, one of our colleagues was asked by a reporter what he thought about our changes in the rules to allow people to bring children onto the floor. And he said, well, I guess it's okay, but I mean, what would happen if there would be 10 children on the floor? And I found myself thinking, one can only hope. But I also want to tell you all one other story before I begin my remarks. There was a day, probably a couple of months ago, that was just a particularly, I don't know, hectic day. And it was hectic in the way I dislike, which is the schedule keeps changing for no good reason. So you're having a vote, now you're not having a vote, yes, you are having a vote. So you have people in your office and you're trying to meet with them and you can't meet with them. And this type of variation drives me modestly crazy. And so I was in the cloakroom and trying to kind of get everybody to agree on what the schedule, in my office, what the schedule now looked like. So I went into one of the old phone booths that are in the cloakroom. And of course, they don't have phones anymore because we all have our cell phones, but they allow you some privacy to sit and make some calls while you're in the cloakroom. And as I was kind of texting and calling and saying, what the heck is going on? Can't anybody give us some certainty on X, Y, or Z? I looked up, and there was a picture of Ted Kennedy, photograph. I just happened to sit in that phone booth that day. And it was a picture of Ted, white-haired, so I don't know how old precisely, with an oceanscape in the background, and he was looking clear ahead, just blue-eyed, strong, serene. Not only did the picture bring my blood pressure down, I thought about Senator Ted Kennedy's confidence in our country, his confidence in the next generation, his sense that no matter what struggles we went through, things were going to be okay, because we are a great country and we are capable of dealing with great difficulties and great challenges and making great progress as a result. So I wanted to share that all with all of you, because that too is what this chamber is about, and that too is what being in the United States Senate is about. I am also so grateful today to be here with my congressional colleagues, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro and Congresswoman Katherine Clark, who you'll be hearing from later, as well as so many other women leaders at the local and state level. And a special thank you to Mary Grant and everybody here at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for once again hosting this conference in leadership. Every American, women and men, must be involved in the conversations that will shape the future of our communities, our state, our nation. And I'm glad that we're all here exploring ways that we can continue to work together to make that happen. Because we know that when diverse voices, including the voices of women, are at the table and at the head of the table, the outcomes are better for all of us. Standing here today in this replica of the United States Senate chamber is quite a remarkable sight. I can only imagine the progress and change we could make for our country if the floor of the actual Senate looked a little bit more like this room today. As of this month, we have set another record for the number of women serving in the Senate. And while 23 women senators is an important milestone, women make up nearly 51% of our country's population. So we need to do far better. We also need to do better in the House of Representatives, where women make up just over 19% of its members. And in our state governments, where we have just 6 women governors across the entire country. During my time as governor of New Hampshire, 4th graders would visit the State House all the time. It's part of their curriculum. And whenever I could, I would meet with the 4th graders. And occasionally I would meet a student who was unaware that a woman could actually be governor. But in New Hampshire, I am the 2nd female governor. So maybe our kids are a little bit more used to it, as I discovered one day when I placed a call to one of our state senators. And apparently the call came in while he was driving. He was with his 2 daughters in the car. They saw my name come up on the phone. He rightly didn't answer it at the time. He called me back later, but he reported in that after seeing my name on the phone, one of the girls asked him whether he planned to run for governor someday. And he asked them, both kids, what they thought. Should he? And his older daughter said, "No, Dad, you shouldn't." And when he asked her why, she said, "Daddy, you're not a girl." And you know, the fact that we have had women in leadership in New Hampshire also brings to mind the fact that I don't think it's an accident that Hillary Clinton was the first woman to win a presidential primary, and she won it in the state of New Hampshire. The research tells us that when women are in elected office, voters kind of get used to it, and voting for women can kind of get contagious. So I want to make sure that all of today's girls grow up never doubting that they could be a governor or a senator or president. Because balanced representation matters. When more women are in the room where it happens, we all, men and women, get better results. Research shows that whether in the private or public sector, when both men and women are at the table, we make better decisions because a wider variety of experiences are shared and considered. Women offer balance. We offer a fresh perspective. We collaborate in unique ways and offer important ideas that may have otherwise been absent from the decision-making process. In a study of almost 2,400 global corporations from 2005 to 2011, Credit Suisse found that companies with at least one woman on their board outperformed similar companies with all-male boards by 26%. And a study from the global accounting firm Grant Thornton found that in 2015, American publicly traded companies with all-male executive boards missed out on $567 billion in profit gains. But even in the face of this data that shows the value of inclusion, women continue to be outnumbered in critical sectors where power is obtained and exercised. And we're outnumbered by large margins. Just last week, the New York Times published a striking analysis that showed that the number of women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies is about equal to the number of male Fortune 500 CEOs who are named John. And female Fortune 500 CEOs are even outnumbered by their male counterparts named James. That's unacceptable. While we have made great strides, breaking many glass ceilings and persistently chipping away at others, the simple fact is that women continue to be vastly underrepresented in the rooms where decisions are made, decisions that are of critical importance to their communities, their businesses, their workplace, their lives, and the lives of their families. I've been encouraged, however, by the outpouring of energy and dedication that we have seen from women across our nation in the wake of the 2016 election. We've seen millions of women join in marches around the country, making their voices heard to those in power, especially their elected leaders. Then women stood up and said, "Me too," in order to demand accountability and equality. And now they are running for office in record numbers. In fact, the 2018 elections will set an all-time record for the number of women who are running for Congress. This is critically important because if we want to make progress across the country, if we want to build better schools, boost wages, address healthcare needs, improve public safety, have a smarter, more effective, more just, and less costly foreign policy, and see our economy truly take off, we need women to succeed. We need to keep pushing for equal representation. And to do that, we must look to places where we've had success in electing women leaders. I'm proud to come from a state with a strong tradition of women serving in elected leadership. Because of New Hampshire's citizen-led democracy, our values, and our tradition of volunteerism and civic participation, there are many opportunities for women to get involved in the electoral process and to learn that they are good at it and that they can make a difference. From our large volunteer legislature of 400 representatives to local boards, committees, and community organizations, we have been able to make women's leadership much more of a norm in New Hampshire than it is in other parts of the country. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into that. One of them is that in most of these positions, these elected officers, one is called on to do a lot of work for little or no pay. New Hampshire's legislators are paid $100 a year. That is set in our Constitution. So we women always tell each other that serving in the legislature is hard and time-consuming work for very little pay, so of course women do it. But on a more serious note, as women have stepped up, as they began to lead the conversation and push for change, they've had an impact. It's no accident that a woman governor, Jeanne Shaheen, pushed for expanded public kindergarten. We were the last state in the country that didn't have mandatory public kindergarten in every community. It's no accident that a woman executive counselor named Ruth Griffin, upon hearing that the only vocational training in our women's prison was sewing, this was like in 2000, pushed for improved vocational training for New Hampshire's female inmates. And I'd add, it's no accident that as a woman governor, I finally got the shovels in the ground to build a new, modern, updated women's prison. Their focus, these women's focus on these issues, reflected their experience, an experience that so many women share, that when every member of a family is able to succeed, the whole family gets stronger. These ideas and opinions bore fruit, became policies that changed people's lives for the better because women fought tirelessly to claim their seats at the table. And it's up to all of us to keep encouraging more women to run for office in every state and in every level of government, to give them the confidence to say, yes, I can do this, to realize that they can overcome the challenges of balancing many commitments, long nights, grueling campaigns, that they can show those who doubted them that they were wrong. Now, I do think it is true that women face unique demands that many men don't. There continue to be systemic barriers for women who choose to run for office. And given our roles in our families, many of us have to consider the day-to-day impact that taking on important leadership roles will have on the lives of those closest to us. But I always urge women who are considering elected office to understand that these challenges are ones that they can address and overcome. If you're thinking about running for office, you need to know that you're not alone, that you'll be surrounded by those who are going through what you are going through. This is particularly true if more and more women run. And women need to know that they can, in fact, break through the barriers that exist in order to make a difference. From my own experience and from getting to know other women in leadership roles, I can comfortably say that despite all of the demands placed on women, we more often than not can find a way to make it work. I first really thought about running for office in 2002. There had been redistricting in New Hampshire, and nobody was clear what the state Senate districts were going to look like till like mid-July. And I thought about running for state rep, which, as you heard, is a small district. But I was sitting in my law firm, and the phone rang, and it was the chair of our state party, and she said, you know, we have this open seat, state Senate seat on the Seacoast. It's based in, biggest town is Exeter, which is my hometown. And she said, you know, you've done this work on this education commission. We all think you'd be really good at this. We'd really like you to run. And I said, well, isn't that nice? That's very flattering. I really appreciate it. I don't think it's really possible. I've got a law practice. I've got kids. My husband's got an intense job. My oldest has disabilities. And I ran through the litany. And she said, well, I hope you'll seriously consider it. By the way, the deadline's tomorrow. So I called my husband and said, you know, isn't this nice? But I went through the whole litany of why I couldn't do it again. And my husband just said, honey, you'd be really good at it. We'll make it work. So that's another key here. I was surrounded by supportive people who encouraged me to keep trying to make a difference. Tom and others who made it clear that they would support me no matter what. So for all of you women who are considering this out there, don't let the people around you undermine your interest or confidence. And if they're doing that, find some other people to hang out with. And while I wasn't successful in that first state Senate election, I ran again 2 years later and won against the same person. And even after another loss 6 years later in the 2010 Tea Party wave that swept our state, my family and friends and colleagues encouraged another run. In 2012, I was elected as New Hampshire's governor, and I was sworn in by a woman Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court in a ceremony that was presided over by a woman Speaker of the House. Today, I am honored to have the distinction of being the second woman in our country's history to serve as both governor and senator. The first being my fellow New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen. So yes, examples, role models, mentorship matter. And I am proud to serve in our nation's first ever all-female, all-Democratic congressional delegation. To truly move our nation and all of our people forward, I'm focused on working across party lines to solve problems, help our businesses and communities thrive, and to keep our country safe. And I have found that more often than not, it is my women colleagues who are focused on putting partisanship aside. Regularly, Democratic and Republican women get together over dinner to foster relationships and find common ground where we can work together. By building these relationships and collaborating together, we've been able to break through gridlock and get results for our people. And our value isn't limited just to the fact that we are working to solve problems, which in this Congress is a feat in and of itself. Our value is also reflected in the challenges that we are prioritizing and the perspectives we bring to tackle them, often bringing forward long-ignored priorities because we have a seat at the table. For example, on the fentanyl, heroin, and opioid crisis, which we all know is ravaging communities in New England and across our country. I've worked with my Republican colleague, Susan Collins of Maine, on legislation called the Supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Act, legislation which works to ensure that grandparents who are raising grandchildren are better able to meet the needs of the children in their care, particularly as more and more of these children's parents are dying or absent as a result of the opioid epidemic. I've worked with Republican Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, another state that is particularly hard hit by this crisis, on legislation to establish comprehensive opioid recovery centers that provide coordinated and comprehensive care to those struggling with addiction, bolstering efforts like recovery housing and support to reintegrate those in recovery back into the workforce. And I've been proud to work with members of both parties, several of them women, as members of the Senate's Common Sense Coalition, which helped reopen our government earlier this year, and then set the foundation for a bipartisan budget agreement that included key priorities like combating the opioid epidemic, investing in public education and college affordability, and giving long-term stability to our budget and our military. We are approaching issues in a way that follows the examples set by our constituents, finding common ground and common purpose. It's not that we don't have disagreements. Often there is a strong battle of ideas. But as we have learned from the example set by Senator Ted Kennedy, we can continue to remain principled and fight for our values while also delivering results for our people and building on the progress that we've made. The American mission, our country's goal, has always been to move forward, to build a brighter future by fully including all of our people in our society, unleashing each individual's talent and energy, reinforcing established strengths, and giving each other the confidence to dare to find new ones. When we bring people in from the margins to hear their thoughts and perspectives, we unleash talent and energy that strengthens all of us. We learn from each other's experiences. We build from collaboration and cooperation. And eventually, we make the compromises that are necessary to make progress and do what is right for the people who we serve. This is not just a process that works in public service. It's something we have to do in every industry and in every community. Taking the time to sit down, listen, and work with someone whose perspective and life experience differs from your own creates a deeper understanding, an understanding in which we can all learn. It builds a deeper sense of the fairness and inclusion that's always been critical to the success of our entire country. And it helps build a future where everyone can get ahead and stay ahead, where each generation is better off than the last. That was part of our founders' genius. They understood that the free exchange of ideas was at the heart of our collective progress. And they understood that we make better decisions when that free exchange is informed by a wide variety of experiences and perspectives, whenever we bring more people to the table. This principle that when we include more people in our civic and economic life, we all get stronger, is the principle that our country was founded on, and it's something we have built on throughout the course of our history. Our founders understood that when we are free to work hard and to follow our dreams, no matter our circumstance or background, we unleash the potential of each of us, and in turn, our economy grows, and the resulting ripple effect strengthens families, communities, and our civic life. Now, I don't want to be too rosy about this. Our founders believed, or said they believed, in the principle that every single person counts. Well, we know they didn't count everybody at first. But they had faith that we'd continue striving to build a more perfect union, that generation after generation would continue to deliver on our nation's promise of equality. And while the road to greater inclusion is not without significant challenges, and boy, are we feeling some of them right now, time and again we have persevered to build a better future. I know everyone in this room is dedicated to the cause of bringing more women to the table, because we know that when more women succeed, we all succeed. That's why we have to keep working together to push women to new levels of leadership, to encourage them to be fearless and take on new challenges, and to prepare them for the success that will build a stronger United States of America. Together, we can help break more glass ceilings and eliminate the gender discrepancies that exist too often in offices, in our boardrooms, and on the floor of the United States Senate. And when we do that, when we can eliminate disparities for women, and other disparities too, we become an even better, stronger, and an even more respected country. So I thank you all for your commitment to that cause and that ideal. This is hard work that we do in a democracy. What our founders set out for us hadn't really ever been tried before, this notion of self-government. It continues to be the greatest experiment in democracy on earth, right? It requires that people share power through the democratic process. That does not come naturally to a lot of people. But we have a process, we have a history, we have a country, and we have determined citizens who understand the value of self-government and the value of inclusion and the kind of progress that we can make when we stay true to it. I hope you all have an incredibly productive day as you dig down into the practical ways that you too can be a part of this, make a difference, and help us build a stronger country. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Senator Hassan. How about another round of applause for our incredible United States Senator? The senator has an extremely full day today, so she cannot be with us, but what words she leaves in the room. What a message for the day as we begin our work and continue this conversation that she has just set up so perfectly for us about the need for women's leadership and for inclusive ways of moving forward. I'm just feeling so jazzed up by that. And now we're going to hear from some other incredible women leaders who represent us at the highest level of government. I'm delighted to have them here with us today as I begin to introduce our first panel. We just heard from Senator Hassan about the figures with women in Senate and in the House. We know that we have work to do there, and we have work to do in so many sectors of government. Today, women hold 23 seats in the Senate, as Senator Hassan just reminded us, and 83 seats in the House. But women are slowly gaining ground, and we expect that 2018, some have dubbed that to be the year of the woman. And we have work to do, but we have with us today some incredibly inspiring women. and it is an exciting time indeed. We have with us today Congresswoman Katherine Clark from Massachusetts and Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. Welcome. Congresswoman Clark has dedicated her career to public service prior to being elected to the Massachusetts 5th Congressional District. In a special election in 2013, she had served as a state senator, a state representative, general counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, and policy chief for the state attorney general. In Congress, she is a vocal advocate for ending wage discrimination, protecting women's health care, access to affordable, high-quality child care, paid family leave, safer schools, and other reforms to address the challenges women and families face. Congresswoman, we have had many students visit the Institute from your district already, and we are thrilled to welcome you back to our chamber today. It's great to have you here with us, Congresswoman. Congresswoman DeLauro has served Connecticut's 3rd district since 1990. It's wonderful to have you here with us today. Since being elected, she has prioritized strengthening the economy, creating good middle-class jobs. For years, she worked closely as a partner in the House with Senator Kennedy on a number of issues impacting working families. She has advocated for innovative investments in our economy and expanded federal support for child nutrition and for modernizing our food safety system. As ranking member dealing with appropriations for labor, health, human services, and education, she has increased support for education, working to make college more affordable for American students and their families. Prior to her service in Congress, she served as the first executive director of Emily's List, the national organization dedicated to increasing the number of women in elected office. Congresswoman, we are honored to welcome you here for your very first visit, but we know it will not be your last. Thank you for being with us today. And we're excited to welcome back Allison King, political reporter from NBC Boston. Allison joined New England Cable News in 1995. In her time there, she has covered 6 presidential races as well as a wide range of political stories throughout New England. Allison has graciously agreed to serve as moderator for 2 past programs here at the Institute. We couldn't think of anyone better today to take on this panel and to lead this morning's discussion. I'm delighted to have you all here. Allison, I turn this over to your very good hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Grant. Great to be here with so many really amazing women. I recognize a lot of faces in this crowd. I want to thank Dr. Grant, Vicki Kennedy. Thank you so much, the Edward M. Kennedy Institute, for having me here. I always love to come here. I loved covering Senator Ted Kennedy. I have to say, over the past couple of years, I've thought a time or two, what would Senator Kennedy do in terms of dealing with the current administration, the current political climate, but that's a discussion for another time. Really excited to have these 2 congresswomen with us here today. Katherine Clark, just had an opportunity to sit down with her was it last week, perhaps? Yeah. In really a very short period of time, has really been a standout in the Congress. Only been here, 5 years, I believe. 4 years, okay. And, you know, talked to her last week about her role at the DCCC as a vice chair of recruitment, which is really, you know, a huge leadership role. So maybe we'll touch on that at some point this morning. And so great that Congresswoman DeLauro is here. You know, I grew up in New Haven, and I did cover politics. I covered in the 90s. I believe you were pretty newly elected at that point. And I just remember covering a couple of your news conferences. They may have been among your first, and thinking, wow, this woman is really smart and really passionate and had great style too. And fast forward 25 years, and you know what a career she's had. So thanks so much. This is going to be fun. We'll just jump right in here. I want to let you all know we're going to talk for about 40 minutes and have a little discussion, and then we're going to turn it over to all of you, so be thinking of some good questions. I want to start out by asking both of you to talk for a minute about how you both ended up running for office. Both of you had pretty solid careers before running for elected office. I'm wondering what inspired you. How did you make it happen? I am sure there are women in this room right now, and I know I have personal friends who I never thought would consider running for office who are suddenly starting to think about this, and really don't have a clue on, as to how to get the ball rolling. So why don't we start with you, Congresswoman DeLauro, and you just jump right in.
Thank you very much. First of all, what an honor to be here. And you're from Orange, Connecticut, right? Isn't that right? Okay, yes. And we have Catherine, who was born in New Haven. So Connecticut is here today. So it's New Haven natives right here with great restaurants and unbelievable politics. But just for a second, Catherine has been in this chamber before, and this is the first time that I have been here. And I say this with a lot of emotion because I worked for Senator Chris Dodd for 8 years, and I had the chance to be on the floor of the Senate with Chris Dodd. And wow, Vicki, this is really startling, and really so, it brings back just so many wonderful, beautiful memories. And I just want to thank the Institute, and Mary, thank you for what you do. Allison, for your commitment to journalistic truth these days. And Vicki, to you, for just continuing your civic engagement, your law career, and keeping the flame alive. So it's really such an honor to be here with all of you today. When I think about being in politics, I have to think about my mother, and it may be trite to think about your mother. Well, she is and was, she just passed away last September, my touchstone in politics. My mom left elementary school age 13 when she graduated, and at that time she was going to go to work. And so they kept her home for a year. She worked in my grandmother's pastry store, and because you couldn't start to work until you were 14 years old at that time. So when she became 14, she maybe had 1 or 2 jobs, but my mother ultimately wound up working in the old sweatshops as a garment worker in the city of New Haven. And she would have me meet her every day after school, and I never realized the method to her madness. Until I was much older and running for office myself, and the noise in the place, how dirty it was, and when you watched women with their backs hunched over the sewing machines, it was piecework. They had to pump out the dresses or whatever they're doing as quickly as they can. And in the needle trades, those are power machines. You could often get your finger caught in the machine. And what you did was you pulled your hand away, you wrapped it up, because God help you if you got a drop of blood on the garment, because you wouldn't get paid for it. And her admonition to me was take advantage of an opportunity for education so that you could be able to succeed. And both my folks, a daughter of immigrant parents, only dare dream their daughter would serve in the United States House of Representatives. But my mother went on to serve on the city council in New Haven. She served for 35 years, the longest serving member, not the longest serving woman, the longest serving member of the New Haven Board of Aldermen, as it was called at that time. And she taught me 2 fundamentally important things. Never give up, and never take no for an answer. That was, and I grew up. I grew up in a household where politics and public policy were, the everyday conversation. But my folks, my dad also served on the city council. My mother didn't succeed him, though. She ran and won in her own right. But they didn't write omnibus legislation. They didn't write a health care bill, a transportation bill, or so forth. What they did, and at their kitchen table, was to make government work for people every single day. If your kid needed a job, If someone needed help with Italian immigrants, of helping them make their way through the system. It was how to make government work for people. And I watched that. I watched that my entire life. And so that I had wonderful jobs. I worked for the mayor of the city of New Haven. I ran campaigns. I was the first woman who ran a statewide Senate race in helping to elect Senator Dodd. I was his chief of staff. And when I was asked, you know, women, you're scared. You know, you are scared to take it on. And, you know, the learning curve was steep. But you also learn about politics that their vacuums don't exist. You either take the shot, take the chance, and run. And so it was not being risk-averse when the opportunity arose to take it on. And I had just left Senator Dodd's office. I went to work for Emily's List. And you should talk to Ellen Malcolm. When I went to tell her I was going to do what the mission of Emily's List was, she wasn't so sure at the outset that I ought to leave as the first political or executive director. But then with her blessing, I went on to run. I have been asked over and over again whether or not this job has met my expectations. And even in the most difficult days, in the most difficult times, this job has exceeded my expectations because of what I learned at our kitchen table, that we are in a place, both Catherine and I, and she is dynamite, my friends. She is dynamite. She serves on the Labor, Health, and the Labor HHS subcommittee with me, and I'll tell you an anecdote later about our service. But the lessons that I took to the Congress were the lessons that I learned in my household at our kitchen table, that government is about providing opportunity and making people able to achieve that opportunity, and that government is there to be there for people, especially in the most difficult times. And that's how I got to the United States Congress.
I told you she had passion. Congresswoman Clark, same question.
Oh, thank you. And again, thank you so much, Allison, for being here, my mentor and friend. I can't believe we're all New Haven natives. That's always my claim with Rosa, but it's so funny. And Dr. Mary Grant and Vicki, just thank you for the Kennedy Institute and for all that it stands for and what it does for so many students and people in Massachusetts, and keeping our civic duty and responsibilities alive and enriched. We're very, very grateful and very honored to be part of it. And to so many friends and colleagues from in the audience, you are a beautiful sight. All these women assembled. It is exciting. And when we come from Washington, it's great to see. But I did not start my running for Congress like Rosa. I too was always inspired by my grandmother, who used to tell me, because for her, it was her time of greatest freedom, where she could play basketball and she was in school plays. But she used to tell me, high school is the time of your life. I don't know about how your high school experience was, but that just struck fear in my heart. I'm like, if this is it, it's gonna be a long road. But for her, it was really World War II when she was Rosie the Riveter. And she went into the factories and also had a huge patch of her hair pulled out in the machines. I mean, she had some injuries, but she loved it because she felt like she was part of something bigger. And she never really lost that spirit. And even though she was a homemaker and did things through her church, that was her community service. She always, inspired people to do more and to think about what it meant to be part of a community. So I moved out to the suburbs of Melrose, and my first race was a true act of bravery. There were 8 people running for 9 open seats on the Melrose School Committee, and I thought that is a good place to start. So it was a guaranteed layup win, and I wasn't really interested in politics. I was interested in education policy. And I was working as general counsel at the Office of Child Care Services and thinking about how do we give every single child a great start. I am a firm believer that early education is the closest we have to a silver bullet for making sure that we have kids who get to kindergarten ready to learn. It is the great equalizer. And I decided we're going to bring all that to the Melrose School Committee. And it was a great experience. And it was one where you get a chance to be an elected official and start working with your community in a different way. I still think, and I see some school committee members from my communities in my district, it's the toughest job in politics. You know, you are so close to people and their children, and what happens to their children means the very most to people. So Shaw's was no longer a safe place to stroll the aisles, but it was a great experience about how process matters, listening matters. We had to make some hard decisions and close 2 elementary schools, which is something I don't wish on anybody in their political careers. But being able to pull people together and listen to their ideas on how we could restructure those schools. And a lot of people didn't like the decision we made, but people felt heard. And that was something that has really stuck with me and try to bring and still inform the work that we do. I was noting when Senator Hassan was speaking that she talked about losing a race as well. And when we're talking about running, and I hope everyone here will consider running. I know many of you already hold elected office or did, but don't be afraid to fail. You know, after being a few years on the school committee, I thought my state senator wasn't doing the job for kids. I got a poll back showing he was wildly popular, but I thought, well, there's 25% of the people who are open to have their minds changed, and we'll just go after them and build from there. And I did lose that race, but that was all right. I remember also having Barbara Lee, who many of you I'm sure know, call me up a couple of days after the race and say, well, what's next? And I think that's something we have to remember to do for women. What's that next move? You lost a race? Okay. So how are you going to plan your next thing? What's going to be the next thing, project you're going to be involved with, or next office? So when I ran for state rep later, I won that race. I won a state senate race in 2010. And then when the congressional seat came open, I thought I gave a very compelling and cogent argument on why I would never run for Congress. But it was really Nikki Tsongas who changed my mind. She told me when I called her, and I called everybody to seek advice and what they thought and what to do, and was weighing it out. And she told me the power of this job is that a small thing, a discrete bill, because not everything is a comprehensive bill like the ACA or these monumental changes in our law, but a small bill, a small budget item, help that you can do for people as constituents. What seems like a discrete thing can change the lives of millions of Americans for the better, and that we can build for the future of our kids. And sometimes that small daily work, the small amendment or bill or budget item. And she said, that is the power of this job. And you can make of it whatever you want. But that really stuck with me. And I threw my hat in and was very fortunate. And I did also notice that Maggie Hassan was talking about having supportive family, which I certainly have, but I will tell you one story. I'm the mom of 3 sons, and my youngest son was 11 when I ran for Congress. So we had a big family vote, and it was unanimous that I should run. I'm like, this is great. We have my in-laws, my parents, the whole gang was assembled. And about halfway through the summer, my youngest son came to me and said, I want to change my vote. I did not realize the impact this would have on my life. So it was a good lesson in civics that do your research ahead of time, because you can't take your vote back once it's cast. But that was my entree.
That's great. Two really different tracks.
Point
Yes,
on something
please.
that Catherine said, because, and I'll just sum it up. It's about taking the risk. If you are afraid to lose, you're not going to win. And that is true in running for office, but that's also very important in the role that we take every day in standing up and fighting for the values that we care about and making the stand in the toughest odds. And that's what these chambers offer us, you know, the opportunity to do, is to take that risk on behalf of people. So
Thank you for that, absolutely. And two really different paths to getting where you got, which is, I think, really helpful for people to see that not everybody's path has to run along the same trajectory. But, you know, we're talking a lot about this record number of women running for office, and it's pretty astounding, the numbers, if you see just how many people are around the country. I'm just wondering why you think that is, and why you think the majority of them are Democrats. I mean, some might say, well, that's easy, Donald Trump, or, you know, is it as simple as that? Is there more going on here? What's your take, Congresswoman?
Well, you know, I think that there is first of all, I think we're now at a generation of women who are less risk averse, if you will, than my generation. It was about, can you do the job? Are you smart enough to do the job? I had never run for office before. This is my first office, and it's like I went to school to learn everything about everything that we needed to know, and that is what often is what women do. But we are looking at a younger generation of women who are more self-confident, more self-assured, engaged in a process where there are the sense that they can take it on. Look, I watch our high school students and where they're going. They're fearless in standing up to what's happening, particularly with gun violence. And my view of them is that, you know, either follow their leader or get out of their way, because they're looking for change. But I think that women are seeing a time when the issues that affect not just them but their lives are central to the public discourse. It is about equal pay for equal work. It's about paid sick days. It's about paid family and medical leave. It's about minimum wage. 2/3 of women are minimum wage workers today. And in the past, we have seen from the discourse that those are the issues that were on the sidelines. They're not issues that people said, oh my God, they're fringe. Today, those issues about women and their education and their future and the future of their families is central to where we want to go. They are looking for a stake in that debate. And it's not about women being sacrificed at the altar of a loss. You used to ask women to run if you were going to lose the race. That is no longer the case. You know, someone in my staff said, well, there are lots of women running, but you know, some of them are running against each other. Amen. We have arrived. We can run against one another. We can, you know, and there are many more advocacy groups out there in addition to Emily's list, which are encouraging women to take it on. And, you know, when you see the floor of the Senate today, And Catherine talked about her 3 sons, and the youngest one said, "Want my vote back?" Because, you know, Mom's not home every night, not there for dinner every night. And I think in the past, that was a real barrier. And today, when we look at the floor of the House, and I'm sure it's the floor of the Senate as well, we are seeing men and women bringing their kids to the floor of the House. It's become new and different. I will still tell you that even in the House, women have a tougher road to hoe. You have to work harder. You don't take anything for granted, because when you stand up in one of these seats here or in the House chamber, they're watching you as a woman to see if you know what you're talking about. So it's a harder road. You don't get the several bites at the apple. I said in a book that I recently wrote that men could drool on the floor of this House and no one cares. Women have to get up and answer the first question, the second question, the 10th question, and be smart enough to do it. But I think younger women, I think a new generation of women see that they have the opportunity to serve, and it's not about the numbers, it's about changing the agenda of this country to make it economically secure for women and for their families. So I think that that's what the impetus is today.
So I just checked my numbers because they're so high that I wanted to make sure I wasn't exaggerating, but 575 women are currently running for the House, Senate, or to be governor. 575. Those are huge numbers. And Emily's List, I believe, in around this time in the cycle in 16, had talked to several thousand women who were interested. In 2018, they have had 34,000 inquiries of women looking to run for office through Emily's List, which is just fantastic. And, you know, I have been in the co-chair of what we call the Red to Blue committee, which came out of recruiting. And so I have talked to hundreds of candidates around the country, and I am delighted that a large proportion of those are women, and women that are running for the first time. They haven't come the traditional path that I did, where you serve in your state legislature and then come. They're running because so many of them looked around in the months that followed the 16 election and sort of said, well, someone's got to run. And they kept looking around and the hands weren't going up. And so they jumped in. And over, I have heard from candidates that they wanted to be able to tell their children, their grandchildren, what they did at this time in our country's history. What they did to help push us back onto a path of justice and opportunity and equality. And I think that is highly motivating to women. And I think it is why you are seeing the record numbers. The combination of the Me Too movement, the combination of understanding what goes on in their families and the struggles they've seen, coupled with a very, in my opinion, misogynist administration. And they understand that. And they are running because they feel that their voice is necessary, and they feel that it is time. It is time that we have more than 19% women in Congress. We need to reflect in all ways the American people. When we do that, that makes us a stronger democracy. That's what representative government is about. And I think women understand and are going to be so successful this year because they are great translators of what happens at our kitchen tables, those issues, Rosa, that you talked about with your parents, how the small things translate and the impact of votes and policy in Washington. And I've thought a lot lately about some of the, that our colleagues across the aisle have remained silent on some major issues, and especially those affecting women. Silent at best. As we've talked about Martin Luther King, and as we honor the 50th anniversary and all that he stood for, one quote that he often used was, the hottest place in hell is reserved for those who are neutral in a time of great moral conflict. And I think that so many women candidates said, not this time. Not this time. I am going to put my name out there. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if I can raise the money that everybody tells me I need to do, but I know I've got to try. And I think that energy, I think a lot of our colleagues were counting on us it dissipating, and that women would sort of say, well, we had our march, we, cleared the market on pink yarn, and now we're going to go back to what we were doing. But that's not what I see. I see a tremendous energy that is building, and people who don't necessarily want to put their name on the ballot have become politically involved, even though they may never have strongly affiliated with a party or with politics before. And I think it's because women understand that our values matter, and how the values that we bring, the perspective that we bring, is important. And if we're not there, they're gonna make decisions about us without our input. And we have to be there, and we have to be in the arena. And that the journey may not work out for some of these candidates, but they are willing to take that on and take that risk that we were talking about. So I'm very optimistic about women and women candidates in 2018, because I really think that women are going to determine this election.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to watch, for sure.
You look at the polling data. Polling data is college-educated women, non-college educated women, African-American millennial women are moving. They're moving, and they're moving to vote, and for my purposes, to vote Democratic. To let us win the House back, which is what we need to do to make the changes.
Well,
Thank you.
So looking back over your careers in elected office, I'm curious just to know what to describe a scenario, something noteworthy, a milestone, a challenge. Congresswoman DeLauro, I'm sure you can touch on dozens and dozens, and you too, Congresswoman Clark. One thing I think about for you in 2016, your sit-in on the House floor with Representative John Lewis, and didn't exactly end the way you maybe were hoping for in terms of trying to force a vote on gun legislation, yet it made huge national news, and there was obviously, affected a lot of people in a lot of ways. Would you like to start in and jump in maybe?
Sure, and I'd love to talk about that, because anytime you get to talk about a partnership with John Lewis, does it get any better than that? But Rosa plays a key role in this story, and gun violence has been an issue that I have been an advocate for common sense gun laws. We can have a Second Amendment, we can respect the rights of responsible gun owners, and we can have common sense laws that keep our community safe. We're the United States of America. We can do these two things at once, but somehow our debate, especially in Congress, has been hijacked by the gun lobby that peddles in fear, and really, they clearly have their eye on the bottom line. It is about profits, and we have to be clear about that. And we have this ritual in Congress that is heartfelt. I am not saying it isn't, where there's a terrible mass shooting, a gun tragedy in someone's district, and that member of Congress comes to the podium, and the state delegation usually assembles behind them, and we have a moment of silence. And it is heartfelt. People are trying to honor those who have died. But I watched, in my brief time in Congress, I'd only been in Congress 2 years at that point, how many of these we had, and that was the only time we talked about gun violence. You know, whether it's mass shootings, whether it's the daily shootings in neighborhoods, whether it's connected to domestic violence, we never talked about gun violence except on these days. And our moments of silence had stretched into decades of inaction. And there was something about Orlando. There was something about those young people at a nightclub. And it was just that loss of life especially at a club where LGBTQ people went to dance. And dancing is what makes us human. Dancing is what distinguishes us from other beings. And the thought of them being gunned down in that sanctuary, where so many of my friends who are LGBT said was the first place that they really felt comfortable, was on the dance floor. And the thought of them being gunned down for who they are, I just became unraveled by this. And I couldn't stand for another moment of silence. And yet we gave those victims in Orlando 4 seconds of congressional time. That's all we did. And then we went right on. And I just started going to my colleagues saying, we have to do something else. We just can't continue in this cycle of violence, silence, violence, silence. And Rosa DeLauro, as I cruised around on the floor saying, what can we do, what can we do, said, you should talk to John Lewis. And I went down and sat next to John Lewis, and he said, let's do something dramatic. Now, when John Lewis tells you want to do something dramatic, you're in, right? And there's no other answer but whatever you think. And, you know, he knows the power of a sit-in. And to be able to do that with him, and as you said, we never got a vote on the 2 bills that we asked. But I do think we connected with the American people in a way that said, we hear you and we see you. And it looks often in Congress like we don't hear you, we don't see you, but we do. And if we have to do something disruptive, if we have to be that stick in the spokes, we're going to do that. And I think all we really accomplished legislatively were a lot of new House rules trying to prevent us from ever doing that again, including lots on photography. But it was a moment. And to pass this baton on now to these high school students is wonderful. And their voices, as Rosa said, let them lead, don't get in their way. We need to fall in behind them because their authenticity on this is key to its success. But I see women in very Republican districts, in areas of the country where you might think, well, you shouldn't go there. That's always been the common wisdom. Don't talk about guns, you know, that's a bad. And they are talking about it. They're talking about the need for common sense gun control. And I think they are going to be what does eventually get us the votes.
That's a great story. I love that story. I always wondered how that happened, so that's really good to know with John Lewis. Congresswoman DeLauro, please.
Sure. Just a point of that, what Catherine didn't say, that none of us thought that we ought to talk to the leadership of the House about this, because we were doing something that was contrary to what you do in the House. In the Senate, you can filibuster. In the House, we have no mechanism. So we decided not to tell the leadership because they would have told us we couldn't do it. And everybody was hell-bent to do it.
They could have plausible deniability.
Right, plausible deniability. Let me just have, if I can give 3 quick incidents that are very, very important. I introduced the equal pay for equal work legislation, Paycheck Fairness, in 1997. Also, Vicki, I will just tell you this. The greatest thrill of my life was in 2004 when I partnered with Senator Kennedy on paid sick days. that I ever thought in my lifetime that that would be something that I had the opportunity to do. It was, you know, really very, very emotional. But paycheck fairness, equal pay for equal work. Men and women in the same job deserve the same pay. I'd introduce that. We're fighting that battle. We are in the minority. We can't get it to the taken up in committee. We can't, obviously then you can't get it to the floor of the House. 2006, we take back the House of Representatives. My friend George Miller of California heads up the Education and Workforce Committee. I go to George and say, George, it's our moment. This comes through your committee. We are going to take it on. I need you. You've got to get it through the committee, get it marked up, and then let's get it to the floor. Now, I was in a leadership meeting, and when I was taken aback. George Miller's a good friend, very, very good friend. He said to me, you don't have enough co-sponsors. Don't let me do your work for you. If you want to get something done, you've got to get it done on your own. And he said, you come back to me when you get the votes. Well, I stood there with my mouth open. I said, George is my friend. Well, another colleague at that time who was serving in the House, his name is Rahm Emanuel. He is now the mayor of Chicago. Rahm looked at George Miller and he said, excuse me, friends, don't get the bitch mad. So I got mad. And I went out and we got overwhelming co-sponsorships, all the Democrats on the bill, et cetera. And then it was a Friday afternoon. George and Nancy, I was between the two of them, and they said to me, you're never going to be able to pass this because it says that you there was no cap on damages if you were discriminated against in this regard. We can't win that fight. It was a Friday afternoon. I will never forget it. And I said, look, just give me the weekend. Give me the weekend. Well, I placed a call to every single one of my Democratic colleagues in the caucus, and they said, it's not about the damages that are uncapped, but we got to be concerned about small business and what happens with businesses. So I went back to the committee, and introduced amendments to the legislation that would allow for small businesses to be able to buy in to the concept. Long and the short of it, George Miller took that bill through the committee, got it out onto the floor, and we won on the floor of the House twice. Democrats and Republicans. The first time, we got 14 Republicans to join us. The second time, I'll just give you the conclusion. We lost it, Vicki, in the United States Senate. And I'll tell you perfectly honest, because I tell the story in the book, 2 women voted against equal pay for equal work. Senator Susan Collins and Senator Olympia Snowe. We had just fought the battle for Lilly Ledbetter, the Fair Pay Act. I think they didn't think they could go back to the well a second time. But for that, it would be the law of the land. So I am committed. We are going to make equal pay for equal work the law of this land before I leave the House of Representatives.
That was great. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to some questions, and we'll get some answers here. So if you have a good question, raise your hand. There are some mics floating around. Megan, right here. Maybe we can start over here. I'm sorry, there was an arm up over there. We'll go to you next.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Megan Costello from Mayor Walsh's Office of Women's Advancement. Congresswoman Clark, I'm excited, especially to see you. You're the first person I ever knocked on doors for, so thanks for starting my career. You know, we're talking a lot today about women running for office, which I think is incredibly important. But for those who might not think that's for them, or for those who might have some hesitation, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about other ways that women can and should be at the table.
Well, you know, look, there's something called the Women's Campaign School at Yale University that a young woman named Patty Russo runs the program. And it's just not about someone who wants to run. It's about people who want to get engaged in activism, in field organizing, or going out and pulling a vote out. There's voter registration. There are all kinds of efforts. There's fundraising. People want to, you know, we don't do these jobs without without the resources, not until we change the system that we have. But there are all kinds of levels within campaigns for which there is a tremendous amount of need and of great interest as well. You know, one can take on, in the organizing capacity, I was a campaign manager. That's the way I started. I didn't go to school for campaign management. I just started working with local candidates, and ultimately, the pinnacle was being the first woman to serve as a campaign manager for a United States Senate campaign in the state of Connecticut. So up and down the various levels of campaigns, women can engage if you don't want to run for office yourself. It's okay, though we want to encourage you. I'll pick it up in a second. Don't worry about it. It is all kinds of ways in which you can get involved. What are the issues that you care about? Become the advocate for those issues in the campaign with a candidate and so forth. Organizing, again, the outside community to make their impact felt on what direction the campaign is going in. Engage in the process of helping to elect. Look, there are lots of, there's lots of great men out there. We can't win. We don't have enough votes in the House. So you go to like-minded people to build a coalition. Well, be a coalition builder for the kinds of issues and concerns that you have, which translates into supporting, running yourself, or supporting others who are running for these jobs, and win.
I couldn't agree more with that. There's so many ways, and now with all this grassroots energy we're seeing with indivisible groups and, you name it, we're seeing force multiplier, all these different groups. There is a place for everyone in the political process. I am also a firm believer, though, that public service covers far more than just electoral politics. I don't want to embarrass her, but I look at the career of Mary Lou Sutters and the work that you have done on mental health for children, human services, is more than most elected officials will hope to accomplish. It is such a lasting impact. And there are so many ways to do that, whether that's through a job in administration, if that's through nonprofit work. There are so many ways to be involved and be a leader. And we have women, there's underrepresentation of women in all of those areas at the top and in those leadership roles, whether it's in a law firm or being the top of a nonprofit. We need more women in our roles, and the understanding that, it's not easy to be a working mom, but we can do it. And we bring a perspective that is so critical. I often think about being around a table at the Office of Child Care Services, and there was a huge discussion over how many hours a child should be in child care. That ideally for their development, it would never be over 8 hours. That was sort of the maximum we wanted to set. And everyone seemed to, there were a lot of men in the room, and they all said, well, yep, 8 hours, that's great. And let's do that, we'll set that policy. I remember saying, how do you get to work? Like, if you have to work 8 or 9 hours, like, how do you, get back to get your children? Clearly, no one in that room had done the 6 o'clock mad dash, been always the one with the last person there. And some of my children's childcare had the $10, $15 an hour for every minute. I mean, just strike fear in your heart. And I remember the day realizing that my entire salary went to childcare. And I'm like, what am I doing? But we can do this. And that is a phase in your life, and we have to do better with supporting families up and down the income We don't do a very good job with very low income, and we do a terrible job with families in the middle, for whom childcare, healthcare expenses, health insurance can be the tipping point that never lets them accumulate any savings that they can pass on and help their children move to the next level economically. So I seem to be off on a tangent. I can't even remember where we started with all of this, but women leadership everywhere. That's my answer, Megan.
I have a friend who is a mom in Marblehead who wanted to do something. Running for office wasn't in the cards. She started a Facebook page and started researching races around the country. Who needs money? Started getting her friends on board, and now they've got a couple of hundred in the local church coming in to meet together. So there's so many things to do is what I've learned. Other questions? Yes, right over here.
Yes, I'm Lonnie Cutler.
Oh, there's a mic coming for you.
Thank you. Lonnie Cutler from Hingham Democratic Town Committee. I am so excited about this momentum of the women. I've been interested in politics since the early 70s on women's rights, and I'm trying to do my best at my age to keep going. Now, I think that this is wonderful that all these women have agreed to put themselves out there and run for office, but we got to get them elected. And it's going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take money. And also, I feel women need a universal slogan. Slogans are very important lately in politics, and I think women should have a universal slogan. They should have goal 50-50 for government and the boardroom, at least.
Amen.
Thank you. Amen. Amen. We're there. We're there. Thank you. Thank you.
And right over here, we've got another question.
Hi there. My name's Cassandra Mangione. I work for Girl Scouts of Connecticut. Yay. So,
Mary Barnaby?
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Me and Jackie here, we work for Girl Scouts. We think about the girl a lot because we serve the girl. We serve 30,000 girls in Connecticut, ages 5 to 17. And I'm trying to think of ways that we can encourage girls as young as 5 when they start, that they should consider running for office or using their voice. I know they do civic action, take action projects, but I was wondering what you think, what we can put out there, what we can say to them to help encourage them to aspire to be like you when they're older.
Well, listen, I'll just take my 2 granddaughters, one who is 13 and one who is 10. I think you can't start early enough, but I think we're looking at kids. First of all, I want to say about the Scouts, I want to make the Gold Award for the Girl Scouts comparable to what the Eagle Scout Award has been for Boy Scouts. I was the director for, I was not the director, I was the honorary chair for a year in Connecticut, so I went to all of the ceremonies and the amazing, amazing civic projects that these youngsters are doing. And I don't know where they go with that from there, and I say this to you. What is it that you all do that helps them to translate what they are doing and the work that they are doing into the effectuation of change in the areas that they are interested in or have done all of this research in? And then you ought to bring in people at every level, whether it is at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, to talk with them about how they can get things done, that their voices, as young as they are, can and should be heard. And if we don't do that, then it's at our peril. I've got my 13-year-old granddaughter. On March 14th, I emailed her mother and I said, Catherine, is Rigby going to be walking out of school? And she said yes. Well, Rigby walked out with 500 kids at the Alice Deal School in Washington, D.C. And she said to me, Bobby, it was the best thing I've ever done. And at 13, she now belongs, and you encourage them. Model UN. Understand the issues, the problems that are there. And my gosh, Sadie, who is as an independent-minded little cuss as I've ever met, you know, she looks at me and it's about, look, but they have views. You know, some of the views you have to temper on today's politics. But our kids are involved in politics today, as young as they are. And sobbing when Hillary Clinton lost the race. And I turned to them both and I said, never give up. Never give up. But you have to help them with what they're doing to translate it for them into what are the avenues for them, whether it's journalism, whether it's running for office, whether it is getting involved in a campaign, whether it's model, whatever it is. Help them to take what you have designed for them to do, to take that experience and allowed them to utilize the skills that you have trained them for.
Great. I don't know if I should even try and follow up that answer, but I think what the Scouts do and what we need to do are model that and talk about all the options that girls have. Because I think too often, still today, we refer to each other as congressmen. When we think of a member of Congress, we think of a white male, older in years, and that's why it's so important that women run, that women of color run, so that we have these models for our children.
More questions? Oh, let me come over here, right over here. Yep, in the back row, and we'll come over to this side.
Thank you both for your really inspirational comments. I really appreciate it. My name is Muna Killingback. I'm from the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at UMass Boston. And I was interested in both of your remarks regarding gun reform, and I thought they were tremendous, and I think that's a really important issue. And I wanted to say that during the campaign, that, you know, for gun reform, there has been a lot of attention on the NRA contributions, campaign contributions, and there was a little bit less attention on the process of people, our elected officials accepting contributions from special interest groups. And of course, we know that the Citizens United decision made that even worse. So I wanted to hear what both your thoughts on the issue of campaign financing and campaign financing reform, and what direction that needs to take at this point. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. Campaign finance reform is really at the center of it all. We have to make sure that we are working for you and not for special interests. And there is absolutely a disconnect. We just had Mr. Mulvaney say the other day, he only allowed lobbyists to come into his office to talk to him who had given donations. That is, I cannot even believe he said that. And I cannot believe that was the policy of his office. But that's where we are, that it's such an accepted practice that you can actually say that out loud as a former member of Congress, now in charge of our Consumer Bureau. But it is critical, and it is part of what we would like to do if we can regain the majority. And I think when we talk about young voters and reaching out to millennials and making sure they're involved, this issue resonates for them. They understand that a system that is working for special interests isn't working for them. And we have to be part of changing that. I fully support a constitutional amendment to address Citizens United and overturn that decision by amending our Constitution, but there are lots of things we can do in the meantime to make the system better. And there are wonderful legislative proposals there, ready to go. We just need to have the political will and courage to shake this system up. But one comment on the gun lobby as well, because the donations are important and they're influential, but here is the best way that we can combat not only the gun lobby, but other special interests that work against the American people. The NRA's true power comes from their grassroots network and being able to make people vote on guns as their top issue. And we can be just as effective. And I think that we are at a turning point that we have to keep pushing this issue and make people say, I too am going to activate my neighbors, start that Facebook page, work for candidates that believe in this issue and aren't afraid to talk about it, and make sure that that's on the top of their lists of ballots, that when we have our local forums, that the questions get asked and answered, whether you're running for local office or Congress or the US Senate or President. And so we can do both. We have to do so much work on campaign finance and how we actually retain a robust democracy by limiting that. And we also have to activate our grassroots and know the power of that, and that is perhaps even more influential than the money, at least with the NRA.
With regard to the gun issue, when it becomes your electoral defeat if you do not vote for gun safety and gun control, gun measures, whatever the lexicon is. Me, I'm for banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. I know other, I think that that's the direction we ought to go. But when today, when it is that you're going to be elected if you vote against those measures, then you're going to continue to vote against those measures. When it becomes the issue that, we're going to turn you off if you don't vote for the gun safety legislation, that's when it will change. And you watch the youngsters again. You take a contribution from the NRA, you're done. And these kids are voting. So they've had the courage to stand up to do it. Jane Mayer's Dark Money book tells it all about what, the overwhelming influence of special interests, corporations, millionaires, billionaires. The system is rigged against middle-class families, working families, and they know it. Now, for us, taking on campaign finance reform, this is a gateway issue in my view. Once you talking to people about wanting to do that and the sincerity of that, I view that we need to do voluntary public financing. That's a direction in which I can move. Our colleague John Sarbanes has legislation to that end. But when I say a gateway issue, if you get their attention, because the public very well knows that the system is rigged against them and that we are awash in this corporate money, its effective is on all kinds of legislation out there. Then they begin to think that you are open and you are sincere about handling a number of the other issues that are the economic issues that they're facing in their lives. So I think as Democrats, we do have to take it on. I'm with Catherine in that we should have a constitutional amendment that overturns what the court did. Corporations are not people, and we should be fighting that issue all of the time. But we've got to get consensus with Democrats to move in that direction. And it has not been easy, because people take a look at their electoral possibilities and they say, my God, if I can't take this and I can't take that and I can't do this, I'm going to lose. And that's a hard culture to break. But I think it's imperative for us to be very, very successful.
All right. We're all, unfortunately, I know we could spend the whole day talking to you two about all of these issues. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. And thank you, Vicki Kennedy, Dr. Grant. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to turn it over to you right now to wrap things up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I apologize we didn't get to all the questions in the room. There were many of them, so conversations over lunch and others. But I just want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Congresswoman Clark, Congresswoman DeLauro, Allison. Thank you so much. And I would invite the Girl Scouts to come to the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate, where we work on teaching you how to build democracy and run for office and do legislative work. This is a great place to do that, and we'd welcome all of you. Role models matter. Role models apparently matter so much, and I want to thank the two of you for being role models for all of us. I want to thank Senator Maggie Hassan for being a role model. I want to thank all of you for this morning's session. We're going to take a very brief break, and then we will reconvene in this chamber for continued discussion. But as we stretch our legs and head out into the hallway, I just want to leave you with one thought. When we think about all the sectors where we can make a difference, there are many sectors. So to your question, elected office, civic office, administrative office, nonprofit organizations, our communities need us. My own field of higher education, I have a bias there. Only 27% of the institutions in the country are led by women. We need some women in the field of higher education too. So plenty of opportunities. Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership, for making such a difference. Wasn't that a great first session? I mean, well, really, really something else. So much fun, and having spent 16 years leading college campuses, I can tell you that the generation coming through our campuses, they really are interested, they are paying attention, they want to make their best difference, and they are seeking avenues. So it is exciting time to figure out how we channel that energy, and the suggestions for ways to get involved, whether it's working on a campaign, running for office, thinking about nonprofit work, school committees, city councils, you name it, there are opportunities. And one other sector that's critical to think about when you look at the numbers of women who were in corporations, on boards that are making decisions that affect our lives too. So there's no shortage of places for women to continue to rise and be active leaders. So this is a great day to be doing this kind of work together. So welcome back. We have a wonderful panel ahead of us, and I'm delighted to introduce the women who are going to be leading that conversation. But to tee it up, when you think about the numbers that we heard from Senator Hassan, from Congresswoman DeLauro, from Congresswoman Clark about the number of women running for office, what it looks like in this year of 2018, that is something that we've heard a bit from Danielle Kurtzelbaum, who we'll hear from in a moment. She's going to be moderating this panel, and we're delighted to have her here with us this morning from National Public Radio. And we heard about the women who were stepping forward and running, and we're going to see more of that. And this panel, which is entitled Tracking Women's Political Participation, looking at the numbers, will help us to inform some of the discussion today. The next panel discussion, I am delighted to welcome a good neighbor from across the construction. You may have noticed we've got a little bit of work going on out here on the peninsula. It's taking shape and it's on its way to being gorgeous and spectacular, but I am delighted that right on the other side is Ann Bookman, who has served as the director for the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, since 2013. Ann has 3 decades of experience in the academy and in government overseeing research on gender equity issues and family support. She was appointed by President Bill Clinton as Policy Research Director of the Women's Bureau at the U.S. Department of Labor, where she served as Executive Director of a bipartisan commission that studied the impact of the Family and Medical Leave Act on workers and employers. And we really are fortunate to have you over there, and I am delighted to have you with us today. And if you want to come on up. Also joining us for our panel discussion today is Amanda Hunter, who is Communication Director at the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, an organization with the mission to advance women's representation in American politics and the field of contemporary art as well. Last month, the foundation, in partnership with the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University, launched a Gender Watch 2018, a new nonpartisan project to track, analyze, and illuminate gender dynamics in the 2018 election cycle. Amanda has overseen the communications team for the foundation since fall of 2017, including its digital strategy and media relations. Prior to joining the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, Amanda served as Director of Marketing and Communication at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., and as Senior Press Representative at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington. Amanda, would you come on up and join the panel as well? Thank you, Amanda. And I'd like you all to now join me in welcoming our moderator for this morning's discussion, National Public Radio political reporter Danielle Kurtzelbaum. Danielle has been reporting at NPR on a wide range of issues since 2015, with a particular focus on gender politics, demographics, and economic policy. Danielle, we can't thank you enough for making the trip up from DC to help lead this conversation this morning. I now happily turn this panel and wonderful discussion over to Anne, Amanda, and to Danielle. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Dr. Grant, Ms. Kennedy. I appreciate it. There's so much New England cred in this room that you invited a Midwesterner in, and I think that's really lovely of you to bring in an outsider, you know? But yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this with both of you because, you know, I was just talking to Anne just before we got up here. I used to cover economics until just a few years ago. I always told myself I'm never going to cover politics, and lo and behold, I do. But one thing about politics is that it's so squishy. It's like there's something reassuringly grounded about numbers in economics. And so what I love is that we are doing a panel called By the Numbers, because that fact that Senator Hassan talked about, how more than half of the electorate is women, and yet only 1 in 5 people in Congress are women. And that is just a stunning discrepancy, and I think it's a fascinating question to get out of. First of all, why is that? You know, nearly 100 years after women got the vote, why does that discrepancy exist? And also, why does it matter? It's a question that can be very easy to jump over if you're an advocate for more women getting into politics. So that's the kind of stuff that I really want us to get into today. So maybe let's just start with the very basics, the both of you. I don't know which of you would like to start on this, but let's talk about, okay, what do women's numbers of representation look like in Congress and in Massachusetts right now, and how do we compare to the rest of the world?
Sure. So in New England, we have quite a range of representation. Here in Massachusetts, we have never elected a female governor. We have had a female governor, but we've never actually voted one in. Our neighbors in New Hampshire, I think Senator Hassan mentioned earlier, has an all-female delegation in Congress, which is so cool. But Vermont has never sent a woman to Congress. So we have some work to do in our region. Currently, right now, there are 23 women in the Senate, 83 in the House, 6 women governors, and 19 women who are mayors of top 100 cities. When Barbara started the Barbara Lee Family Foundation 20 years ago, only 16 women had ever served as governor of a state in the United States. Now it's up to 39. However, there's been 2,300 men who have been governors. So 46 women have already declared to run for governor this year, and with filing dates ahead, we expect more. And there's 36 gubernatorial seats open this cycle. So there are your numbers. I hate math, so.
Gotcha.
Okay. Let me just add to that. But first of all, I just want to welcome Dr. Mary Grant. It's wonderful to have a new partner here on Columbia Point. I apologize for all the piles of dirt. We don't like them either. They will go away, we are told. Anyway, to have somebody who has been advancing women's leadership in higher education and many other fields as a partner right here on Columbia Point is terrific, so welcome. And Mrs. Kennedy, thank you so much. I think you're really, to me, like a symbol of how much women can do politically and as public servants without even being elected. You are everywhere standing for women, standing for people who are disenfranchised. And I have to say that one of the things that thrills me about the Kennedy Institute, among its many, many virtues, is that when I go by here and I see yellow school buses, and I know how much you are doing to bring the next generation into civic life and civic engagement, I think it's just fantastic, so thank you. So Amanda has said a little bit about the situation in Massachusetts. We were going to sort of have Amanda focus a bit more on the federal picture and myself a bit more on the Massachusetts picture. It's a proverbial kind of good news, bad news story because we have, on the one hand, 25% of women in Massachusetts in the state legislature, and this is not a great number. And actually, in 1993, we had 23% of women in the state legislature. So you can see that from over 25 years, we have gained 2%. This is not acceptable. Another point I wanted to make about the state legislature is the very low number of women of color. And I think this is actually an issue that we need to talk about more. Right now, in the Massachusetts state legislature, we have only 3 women of color. And this is, lower than we've had before, and is really a problem, and I think we need to address this. On the other hand, we do have some really good news here in Massachusetts. We have, as many of you know, for the first time, 6 women of color in the Boston City Council. This is historic. Yes. And these women are amazing. I think there are many in the room, and many of you know them. They are each passionate advocates for issues that they really care about. They're role models for younger women. It's no secret that the Boston City Council was a white male club for many, many years, and they are really changing history. Another good thing that's happening is that we have 4 out of 6 women in Massachusetts now who hold statewide office. This is the highest we've ever had of women holding statewide offices. So this is another piece of the good news. But I think we have to be really cognizant of the fact that we are still very low. We are nowhere near gender parity, and we have to figure out what we can do, especially for women of color, but for all women, to create not just parity, but equity.
Well, so let's get into that, right? Because if we don't have parity, and if we're in fact so far from parity, I mean, what is it that's keeping women and women of color in particular, or disabled women or any demographic of women out of office? Is it fundraising? Is it recruitment? Is it voters not picking them? Like, what are the barriers?
I think there are a number of structural barriers that women face. Women of color, in addition to facing gender bias, also have to contend with racial bias. On the flip side, one really exciting thing that we're seeing in this cycle are so many women stepping up to run from so many different backgrounds. And we know from our research that voters connect to women because so many women run for office because they see an impact of an issue, rather than just looking in the mirror and thinking they'd make a good-looking senator. And so many women who have disabilities or who have children with disabilities or who are veterans or so many different backgrounds. There are mothers now who have lost children to gun violence who are stepping up to run for office. So that is on the flip side that we're watching very closely this cycle, and hopefully this will be the year that we can kind of change the face of politics and turn some of those stereotypes around.
So at the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, we've been asking this question for quite a while. And in 2015, we put out a publication called Profiles in Leadership. We did this in partnership with the Women's Pipeline for Change, which is an organization that is dedicated to increasing the number of women of color in elective office. And we did what really a first ever guide of all the women electeds at all different levels in Massachusetts who were women of color. And again, we saw this kind of good news, bad news situation. On the one hand, we saw that there were only, in 2015, 95 women of color that had ever been elected in the entire history of the Commonwealth. I mean, that is shocking. That is totally unacceptable. On the other hand, we saw the women of color who had run, who had stepped forward, were incredible public servants, contributed to economic growth, to educational and quality improvements, to better early care and education, to more affordable housing. They had championed all the issues that really matter to women and their families. And we did look at what some of the barriers were, and I would say, number one, probably fundraising. This is just a huge barrier that women of all different backgrounds face. Number two, when you run for office, usually you have to leave your job to run. This is a huge economic barrier. Aside from the fact that you have to go out and raise money for your campaign, you're losing your income. And there are many women of color who don't have another person to contribute to the household income. And finally, I would just say the lack of role models, because there have been so few women of color. I think now we're seeing more and more women of color stepping up, and in fact, we're seeing women really, I would say, challenging, I would say smashing the stereotype of what a woman in politics looks like.
And on that fundraising question, is it what, that these women they're not tapped into the donor networks, or they're not as tapped in as men are? Why is fundraising a difficulty?
Yeah, I think that a lot of men are part of, the proverbial old boys network,
right.
And they have, through their professional connections, their business connections, men who they can turn to and ask for money. And I think that a number of women we interviewed for the Profiles in Leadership book said, I have never had problem with fundraising for a candidate I was working on. I never had a problem saying, will you support so-and-so who's a really great candidate? But asking for money for myself, I've never done that before. And so I think that some of the programs that we're seeing emerging right now, programs that have already been in operation for a long time, like Emerge, and I know Ryan Olson is here in the audience, who are doing fabulous work. And now Ryan and I were talking actually at the breakfast about work that's being done to train people to work on campaigns. So not only to train women to run for office, but to train people how to work on campaigns, which very much has to do with fundraising, among other things, and media, and strategy, and so on.
Gotcha. So I want to zoom out and maybe back way up and get to a very basic question that I imagine many women in here already have an answer to in their heads. But just to get at this, I was looking at a poll just before we got up here. It's a January poll from a few months ago from CBS News. And CBS asked people, okay, how important is it that we elect more women to office? And 39% of men and 54% of women said it's very important. 26% of men said it's not very important. 16% of women said it's not very important. Everyone else was somewhere in the middle. Which is just to say that this is not a settled question for people, that there should be more women in office, that, that sort of normative idea. Likewise, there's a huge partisan split. 77% of women Democrats and 19% of women Republicans say it's very important. So maybe let's just step back and look at that. Like, why is it important, do you think, if you think it's important, that is, for more women to be in office? Do women govern differently? What is it? Why is this a question we are asking?
I could spend all day talking about this, but
okay, let's do it.
So women do govern differently, as some of our speakers alluded to earlier. Women are more likely to reach across the aisle to get things done, to be more collaborative. And it's funny that you mentioned that poll, because we did research a couple of months before that and found that voters are very fed up with the status quo. And if voters believe that women govern differently, they're more likely to vote for a woman, because they see a vote for a woman as a vote for change. And one reason is because voters believe that women are in touch with their lives. And if you look around and you see all the women that are running now that have children and they're having many different campaign ads, there are pros and cons to that, but one pro is that that's a way to demonstrate that they're in touch with the lives of voters. So at the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, obviously we believe that having women at the table is essential to a vibrant democracy, and we also believe that representation should look like the population of the districts that the government officials represent. But we were really delighted in late 2017 when we did this research called Opportunity Knocks, because we found that now is an excellent time for women candidates. And for Democrats and Republicans, Republican women actually faced a lot of gains, specifically on issues that women are typically weak, like Homeland Security. And then Democratic women did very well on issues like healthcare and education. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. We can all poll till the cows come home. But I do think if you look around, it does seem like people are very fed up with the status quo and with white male government officials, and they're looking for change.
And I just want to get into plug for that Opportunity Knocks report. I've been reading it. It is really interesting, and I highly recommend reading it. Sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a real sense of urgency now that women feel about running for office, and that is shared by many voters in the country. I think that many people feel that our country, our democracy, is really in a state of crisis. That it's not only women's rights that are being attacked, women's right to choose that's being attacked, but groups like immigrants, like religious minorities, like Muslims, Dreamers, DACA, young people, all these different groups are being attacked. And I think that women are feeling not only that it's important for them to run as women, but that they want to take a stand on what our democracy should look like right now, that it really needs to be inclusive, that it really needs to be equitable, that we really need to address the wealth gap. And I think that a lot of the grassroots movements that are going on are really impelling women forward to run. And it's not just the Me Too movement. I mean, I think that I want to say very importantly that I think the Black Lives Matter movement is also incredibly important. I think that, you know, we started seeing an increase in communities of color with men of color being shot in their cars, walking around in their neighborhoods. Now we're seeing things like, I don't know if all of you saw the unbelievably, almost unwatchable video of a woman in Alabama, an African-American woman being dragged to the floor by police because she questioned whether she should be paying for plastic knives or spoons in a, you know, fast food restaurant. There are just attacks on communities of color and people of color, women of color, that I think many women feel is a direct assault on them, whether they're a person of color or not. And they want to take a stand and they want to say, this is not American. And this is not the America that I grew up in and that I believe in, and I want to create change to make that equitable, democratic America.
Yeah, and just to add to Ann's point, Barbara always likes to say that women have always been the backbone of every social movement in history, and now we're seeing women out front leading these social movements. And the potential impact of this next generation of leaders that are stepping forward through these movements is really incredible, and we're excited to see where that goes.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry.
No, keep going, please.
No, I was just going to say that I feel like we are trying to create a tipping point. We're not exactly at the tipping point, but we are creating the tipping point. A tipping point is when you have a small number of changes that become so multiple, so many, that they actually create a qualitative, unstoppable change. And I think what women are doing in this election cycle is we are creating that tipping point. And after that, we're going to see a very different kind of electorate and elected officials.
Gotcha. So, I mean, we're talking a lot about this moment right now when we have a record number of women running for House. We will quite likely have a record number of women running for Senate. State filing deadlines just haven't happened yet. But, you know, I think it's really important to get at this question of this wave of women that we keep talking about and hearing about who are running for office. To what degree is it a wave of women running, and to what degree is it a wave of Democrats running, right? Because, I mean, we were just talking about these numbers that the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers put out some data relatively recently that showed that, you know, 15.9% of candidates in 2016 for Congress, I believe this is, were women, and this is as of April. And this year, despite this giant jump we keep talking about, only about 22% of candidates this year are women. So, I mean, this wave is, like, there's still so much room for it. So, to what degree are we looking at just a surge in enthusiasm among Democratic women and men at the same time? Because that's kind of what it looks like, right?
There are definitely, and our friends at COP always kind of, I like to joke that they rain on our parade with this a little bit because they bring us back down to earth sometimes, and they need to. But there are definitely a lot of men stepping up to run as well. I think the difference is there's long been, maybe it's a myth, I'm not sure, that there's a confidence or an ambition gap with women that they have to be convinced to run for office. Right now, we're seeing women stepping up with that sense of urgency that there just simply isn't time to wait. And so women are challenging incumbents, or they're running for higher office, not taking the traditional path of starting at the school board and or the board of selectmen, going maybe right for state rep or Congress. So that's where I think the difference is, because if women are told to wait their turn, I think that they've figured out that it's never going to be their turn. It's always going to be some guy's turn, and it's time to step up and throw their hat into the ring.
I see you're saying there's a kind of qualitative difference, perhaps, between the women who are stepping up and the men who are stepping up this year.
Yeah, that, and our friends at all of the different training organizations have reported being absolutely inundated with requests, and they've been training thousands and thousands of women, and there are so many of those great programs around the country. So we know that a lot of women are training and stepping up to run at different levels, but certainly men are also stepping up too.
Yeah, I mean, we're also at the Center for Women in Politics seeing an increase in interest in running for office among our alumni from our graduate certificate program in gender leadership and public policy, which trains women for leadership positions in both the public sector and the nonprofit sector. And we're very proud that we had 4 alumni run in November 2017. We had not had alumni run recently, although we do have several alumni that are in the state legislature, but we had, and some of them won and some of them lost. I thought it was important that Congresswoman Clark talked before about, you know, it's okay to lose, but then you have to run again. But we have someone who was elected to the Cincinnati City Council, the first African-American woman ever elected to the Cincinnati Public Council. And our very own Denise Schultz on the staff of our center has been re-elected to school committee in the city of Franklin. So we're very proud of our alumni. And I think that, I just want to echo also what Amanda is saying. I think that many women now are not waiting to be asked. There was a common story, almost a cliche, that women had to be asked 7 times before they would agree to run. And I think now women are saying, they're not even waiting to be asked. They're just saying, they're picking up the newspaper, they're listening to the radio, they're looking at their social media, and they're reading one more outrage after another about what's happening in their country. And they're saying, I've got to jump in with both feet. I've got to run. And they're just moving ahead.
So, you know, looking at all of those women, like you're saying, who decide, hey, I've got to run, and they've decided right now, I mean, a lot of the women I've talked to out there who are running for the first time, they cite Donald Trump's win. These are a lot of Democratic women, because those are a lot of the people running this year. And they cite Hillary Clinton's loss. But as 2016 recedes in our memory, I'm wondering about you guys' thoughts on this wave of women. Can it be sustained? Can it grow? Can it grow to, you know, more types of women who are not running for office? Can it grow to Republican women? How does this get sustained, if at all?
So Barbara always likes to say that this isn't a moment, it's a movement, and it really feels like something big is stirring in American politics beyond just one cycle. Hopefully we will see this momentum continue. Opportunity Knocks also found that voters are open to women who have never held office before, which is great news for all of the first-time candidates who are running. What's important is just to highlight the work that they've done in the community. We also know that these women that are running are going to face a lot of additional challenges on the way that they're judged by voters simply for their gender. Women really have to work to prove their accomplishments and qualifications, while men can simply list points on a resume. Women have to really use action-oriented language and show I balanced a budget or I managed this much money. So that's one barrier. And the other, which I'm sure you've all seen somewhere, is that voters will vote for a man that they do not like but they believe is qualified, and they won't vote for a woman if they don't like her. So that's, and likability is a tightrope in a lot of cases. We have a likability study too on our website. So these women are going to face a lot of challenges, but they have opportunities as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think the issue of sustainability is really, really important. And it has lots of different components. I think one of the things we heard about earlier is the work of girl-serving organizations like the Girl Scouts, and there are many wonderful girl-serving organizations throughout the country in different communities. You know, you can't start early enough, I think, to build a pipeline of girls, young women, college-age students, and after, who are interested in running for political office. And then I think we really need to talk about new approaches to fundraising. Emily's List has always been fabulous, but there's only so much money that Emily's List can raise. I think we've got to find new ways of raising money that are very localized, very community-based, and where people can contribute not just money but time. Because I think that one of the things in terms of sustainability is people finding time to work on campaigns, people seeing it as part of their civic obligation to work on a campaign, whether it's for a school committee member or a mayor or a person in Congress, but really seeing it as part of what you do as an American is to either donate money if you can or donate your time.
Yeah. I got actually one anecdote to add to that. I went down and reported on that Georgia 6th District special election last year between John Ossoff and Karen Handel. And one thing that really struck me was that, you know, I met John Ossoff and I interviewed him, and he, you know, seemed like a nice enough fellow, but I remember like watching the women who went out door knocking for him, and I realized like it was the women who were powering his campaign. It was genuinely stunning to see just how much the women in his district rallied behind him. They were the ones who were going to try to push him over the goal line in the end. And so I think that's a thing that gets underreported in some of this 2018 pink wave, so to speak, is it's not just the women running, it's the women behind the candidates who do an awful lot of this work, right?
Yeah, and I think that the first Women's March was a catalyst. Women marched, and then they organized on social media, they wrote letters, they contacted their members of Congress, and then took it a step further and started volunteering on campaigns and running for office.
I think one of the other things about sustainability also is mentoring. And that's part of what I think can really keep us moving forward. I think to bring young women to meet people like Congresswoman DeLauro and Congresswoman Clark is really, really important. Women need to see other women of color, of different genders, of different sexual orientations, or transgender women, just to see that women of many, many different kinds can run for office, and to hear the lessons from women who are experienced elected officials.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's all for the panel sort of segment of this, but I think we're going to open it up to Q&As. So if you have a question, raise your hand high, including in the balcony. We don't want to forget you all. We have a woman over here.
First, thank you for participating. My name is Josephine McNeil. I come from Newton, Massachusetts, where I did run an organization that developed affordable housing in Newton. I am now the co-chair, I retired, a co-chair of an organization that is advocating for housing affordability in Newton. But what I wanted to speak to was your comment with respect to women of color. Someone said it was astounding. I think given the demographics of Massachusetts, where I think African Americans are maybe 7% of the population. I think the lack of women of color is not so surprising, and the fact that people of color live primarily in Boston and Framingham and I don't know what some of the, but those are the communities. But I think what happens in politics, at least my observation in Massachusetts, is that people, low-income people or people of color, are not really reached out to participate in civic engagement. Therefore, when people run, they don't necessarily have the support. And I think that what's missing is the politicians need to go into communities of color, get people registered to vote. You've got to make people believe, and I don't think many people believe, that their vote matters or what they say. So if we want to have women of color involved in politics, then we have to reach out to the people who are most likely to vote for them. That's my comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really agree with you, and I think, I don't know, there are a number of women here from the Boston City Council. I don't know exactly where you are, but many of those women, I think, are examples not only because they dared to run and they won, but because of the way they organized their campaigns. The amount of door knocking that they as individuals did, the amount of encouraging their neighbors and their friends and people that they went to church or mosque or synagogue with to come out and get involved in their campaigns, I think has been a real hallmark of all the women that got elected to the Boston City Council. And that is, they're not only role modeling, yes, I'm a woman of color and I can run for office, but they're role modeling a new kind of grassroots, very activated, community-based, neighborhood-based campaign.
More questions? Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Damali Vido. I'm the Chelsea City Council President, and thank you for having me here today. I had my hand raised at the previous session for about 20 minutes, and I was really upset during the break because no one acknowledged me. And I really just wanted to bring up exactly what is being brought up and piggybacking off of what the previous speaker said. I think it's really hard for people of color to get involved into a system that has historically disenfranchised them. Thank you. And feeling as if though you can be a voice. I had the honor of running 2 years ago, and we had zero representation of my community. That's about 70% Latinos. We had not one Latino person on the city council, and so I ran, and I'm there, but I'm still up against the Old Boys Network, and I'm still challenging every day. So at the previous session, what I wanted to bring up was that if we're going to talk about women in leadership, it's important to discuss the intersectionality of LGBTQ, of size, of age, of language, of all the different things that. So there are enough barriers as a woman, but could you imagine being a big woman, a woman of color, a woman that's disabled, a woman that's older? So I just wanted to really, I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name right here, but I really appreciate all of your comments were centered and kept the issues of women of color on the forefront. And I think unless every single voice is at the table, we as a country will never get anywhere. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for letting me speak.
And I just want to get at something you just said before that, Anne, about responding to her question about campaigns being more grassroots focused. It sounds like, to become more inclusive, just the very way we picture what a political campaign looks like is going to have to change. Am I hearing you right on that?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that, you know, one of the things that we've seen historically, for example, if you look at the Boston City Council, is certain kinds of male political networks, some of them, unfortunately, although I'm very pro-union, very pro-labor, some of them based in the labor movement, because even in the labor movement, as progressive and important as it is, sometimes we have seen certain skilled trades being dominated by white men and so on. And so if your network is a group of white tradesmen, that can't be the kind of campaign that's going to elect a very diverse cross-section of women. So we really have to look at, because campaigns are really about coalition building. Campaigns are about identifying different constituencies, figuring out what their common issues are, figuring out different roles for different groups, and figuring out how to unite them around some common change agenda, I would say. And I think that the importance of a change agenda, in other words, not just the numbers, but really what does each campaign stand for? And going out and having town halls and meetings across kitchen tables and, you know, in different community centers and asking people, what's on your mind? What's it like for you getting up in the morning as a single mother trying to get 2 kids to work and getting to your job? What's it like for you? What do you need? Oh, you don't have any reliable public transportation. Okay, I'm going to make that a centerpiece of my campaign. So I think more and more our campaigns need to be based in the social knowledge of our constituents, our diverse constituents, and then building a social change agenda around that.
Okay, excellent answer. I can't top that. All right. Oh, I see a question way up here.
Hi, my name is Leah Glover, and I'm with Fairfield County's Community Foundation, the Fund for Women and Girls in Norwalk, Connecticut. My question is for Anne. Anne, what do we tell the next generation? The young girls from 5 to 7 years old who have different inspirations, inspirations in politics, fundraising, all of those different behind the scenes positions that will even help them later on in life to be able to inspire to do some of the things that they talk about right now in our small groups. The Fund for Women and Girls, that's what we do. We help young girls and we help young women who come from low economic backgrounds to be able to reach those goals that may not be readily available to them with someone who has my background with, you know, education and come from good families and things like that. What do we tell the next generation?
Well, I think that, you know, that's a great question, and I also want to just take my hat off to your foundation. We've been working with your foundation on our New England Women's Policy Initiative, and we're very grateful and appreciative of your work. I think that part of the challenge of talking to young girls is to try to, on the one hand, tell them honestly about some of the obstacles, because we can't just be saying, rah, rah, you know, do it. We have to talk about systemic racism. We have to talk about systemic sexism. We have to talk about some of the obstacles that they're going to face. And then I think we have to introduce them to as many young women and older women as possible who all look completely different and look like them, and say, this is how somebody that you know in your community managed to go from just being an activist in her neighborhood to getting elected to her school committee or being elected mayor. So I think, again, that issue of role models, but, you know, I would say balancing some of the things that people are going to be up against, because if you just encourage girls and you don't tell them it's a fight, because it is a fight. And I think the intersectionality perspective makes it even more of a fight. So again, I would just say balancing sort of the struggle and the gains that can be made and the change that can be realized and the kind of society we can all build if we come together.
Okay. We have a question here. We have a mic coming to you.
One, to teach them how to get elected, but then teach them how to do the job. And that support is vital, especially for young elected officials of color or women of gender. So there's a couple of women mayors here, 3 women mayors here, but that is the key. They need a support system once they get in, and you touched on it, Ann. But because it's a very lonely job if you don't have people around you to help you. Thank you very much for everything you're doing.
One more, and I saw this woman's hand just go up. So.
Hi. My question is, I feel like we are consistently talking about like young women, and then we're talking about women that are looking to run for office, but we're forgetting like college-age women and women from like 18 to 24, and how we foster and make them believe that they are capable and able to be in leadership and do things that historically women aren't doing. Yeah, just kind of.
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of organizations, national organizations, that are addressing just that age cohort. I know at the Center for Women in Politics, we are partnering with Ignite, which is one of these national organizations for our New England Women's Policy Conference this coming November 16th, in case anybody's interested in coming, because we feel it's really important to have a special track for college-age women and women in their early 20s. To teach them about running for campaigns, working on campaigns, and about public policy. But there's other organizations. There's Vote, Run, Lead, and I'm sure I'm forgetting 5 other ones. But there are organizations out there, and I would suggest for anybody who's running for office, locally or nationally, that you do a little homework and find out what those organizations are, so that you can tap into their local chapters and call them and get them involved in your campaign.
Yeah, there are a number of incredible training and incubator programs across the United States. Vote, Run, Lead, She Should Run, Running Start, Run for Something, that are all doing really important training. And also millennial women, it's really important for them to get involved. That's a little bit older than 24. But when you look at the average age in the House of Representatives is 57, and the average age in the Senate is 61. And in 2019, millennials are going to take over as the largest living adult generation. So we're seeing some millennial women stepping up to run now, but hopefully we'll continue to see that trend.
Right, yeah, it's all about getting that light to even go on in someone's head, that it occurs to them to even run for office, which just doesn't happen with a lot of young women, I don't think. But, all right, I feel bad because there are other questions, but we have to wrap it up. But come find us over lunch. I don't know about these two. I'm happy to talk to you more about this. But thank you all.